Hi, it's Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. Today I'm going to show you how to make a loom knitted footstool cover. I've been seeing pictures of these in various magazines and most of them are around $60, and I was just looking at it and I was like, that's really cute. And then I was looking at it, I was like, it's not $60 cute. So as I was out and about in some antique stores and like the kind of thrift stores and stuff, I noticed I was seeing a lot of footstools, sort of like that you would buy for little boys when they're potty training, for wood. And then I started looking around and I started noticing a lot of wood footstools of various sizes. I picked up this one for $6. It's just a little footstool. I wanted it to be a little bit high off the ground so you could use it, in a chair. Really wanted a round one, but the round ones, I found one that was missing a leg, and one that was the ones I kept finding were just going to require me to do things to the stool before I even got started. And so I thought, well, I'll get what I can get. So this one was oval. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, because if I would have used the round, if I could have found a round one, I could have used the large yellow standard plastic loom that comes with your plastic set that you get. It's like 11.5 diameter kind of one. So it would have been convenient. So the idea is whatever your footstool is, you're going to have to match it to your loom. So if you don't have a large loom, you're going to have to get one. Because you're going to have at least this size one. The smaller round ones that I saw that I would have liked to have had I not had to do all the other repairs would have been perfect for this. Also, if you're doing like a bar stool top, this is probably going to be great. So it needs to be either larger or about the same. You're going to have a lot of, depending on the yarn you use, you'll have some stretch to it. So this one would have been too small for the oval, because the oval is going to change the way the knitted fabric stretches. If it's round, it would have been a lot easier. So I do have, fortunately, my great big loom that is an antique loom. And these are available. You just have to dig and really look for them. They're not cheap. This was like a Christmas present for me one year. But because I went with this oval shape, I needed the large loom. This is an antique one that was made in Massachusetts. It's all wood, and it is 15.5 inches in diameter. So it is large, a lot larger. This one allows me to do like a whole, I could actually loom knit a sweater on this for a human adult. So it is a larger loom. But if you can find about a 10-inch or 10 to 11-inch round wood stool or plastic stool, it doesn't have to be wood, you can use just the standard yellow one. Any bigger than that, or if you do what I did and went and got this oval one, you're going to have to start looking for a bigger loom. I got my big loom. And the instructions are going to be the same no matter what your stool is. You're just going to have to do different length, and you're going to have to, do some and eyeball it and actually take your knitted fabric and compare it to your stool, depending on how you want to do your stool. Now, I wanted it to be sort of a comfy stool for someone's feet. I have the stool, and if you've been watching my videos, you know I've been making bench cushions for my various benches. So I had some scraps of the sponge bed topper that I was using for the cushioning of those. So I cut my scraps, and they're not really great, so I'm going to have to sort of line them up. And I'm going to put them on top of the stool. And because I needed more stretch because of the weird oval shape, and this is the biggest loom I had, and I didn't want to have to do a bunch of other crazy stuff because I wanted this to be a simple project. So in order to compensate for the holes that will between the loom stitches, I'm just going to do a liner over my foam, and I'll show you how I put all this together. This is why I said to use wood. If you're using plastic, I don't know, you might have to glue it. You may be able to staple it. I don't know. I have never really done anything with a plastic stool before. I've done things with wood. So I prefer wood, and like I said, you can find the pretty cheap, or a wood composite wood is fine, a press board, that'll all work. Anything that's like a wood that you can staple. So I cut a piece of fabric that matches the colors of and I went with the darkest one, so you won't really be able to see it as much, poking through the holes. And I cut my fabric, and we're gonna attach all that together before we put our loom knit cover over it. So I'm using a weight of 4 yarn on my loom, and I just used an E-wrap stitch. That's all I ever use, and I always want to call it a stockinette stitch because that's what I learned it as, not as E-wrap, but that is the term these days. I learned all this back in the 70s. I knitted for my size for almost 12 inches long. So, and like I said, I just kept going back and forth and modeling it, putting it over my stool, sort of stretching it. You need to leave room for, we're going to cinch up the middle. Well, it's actually going to be, this is going to be the middle. So you need to leave room for the cinching part at the top, and you need to have a little bit of room for it to be able to be affixed underneath the stool. So remember that. I would leave, like it's always better to err on the caution of too much, because you can fold that under and staple it underneath the stool. Whatever, you know, when you're working with your stool, whatever plus 4 inches extra. All right, so I have knitted, like I said, for the 12 inches, because that's what, as I kept going back and forth on my stool to see what looked good and what was going to give me enough room to stretch it underneath. Many of my videos, you know, I love these really long, pretty sharp upholstery needles. I'm just going to do that just like I normally would take things off the loom. This old loom is a little bit trickier because it does not have the grooves that modern looms have for your needle to run along. Off the loom, and I should have added that I was using a weight of 4, but I used 3 skeins at the same time. I think I didn't complete my thought there. So I'm going to cinch this up. What we're going to do is attach our liner to our stool with a furniture stapler. The thing I want to do is I'm just going to put a squiggle of hot glue, just sort of hold this in place. All right, the liner is going to be under the loom knitted part, so I want it to be smooth, but it doesn't have to be perfect. After I've aligned my fabric, I want it to cut it. The easiest way is to find what fabric you want, put your stool down on it, and then you need to pull up enough of it that it's going to come up that you're going to be able to securely staple it all around. So since I don't have the dimensions of your stool, I can't give you the dimensions. I'm just showing you how to do it. So if you're going to have a cushion, attach your cushion somehow to your stool. I just used some glue. And then flip the whole thing over on top of your fabric, and then I would trace the actual stool so you know where to set it, and then just sort of pull up your fabric and see how much you need on each side, all the way around. You want it to be all the way around so you can affix your fabric to the underside of your stool. I'm going to just use a few dots of glue just to make it working with it a little easier here. Alright, so first of all I'm going to start by this is where it's important to have the wood. Putting one in there. Putting one in here. And if it doesn't go all the way in, like mine are not going all the way in, that's okay, because I'm going to go through with a little like finishing hammer, and I'm going to tap those in a little bit better. Now I'm going to alternate sides by pulling my fabric taut. And when you see, so I have legs on the, well yeah, I have legs, but I have legs on my stool. So I'm going to fold the raw edge of my fabric under right there. as much as I can. And then I'm going to pull it taut, staple around that. So I have a staple on each end of the leg. Now again, since mine is oval, I'm having to do a few little fabric gymnastics. You probably won't have as much if you've got a round stool. Because it's oval, and we'll probably have to do this with the round too. There might be parts where you need to sort of do a fold just to get it to lay flat. Just like sort of like wrapping a package, just fold it as neatly as you can underneath. Remember, this is our liner. It's not going to be visible. Alright, so we have our stapling on there, and we have, so it's the cover. And I've done it as tight as I can to make it taut. The next thing I've done is found a stiffer piece of felt. You could use the same fabric if you wanted to, but I just find the stiffer felt works well. And I'm going to position it down on my stool. And what I want to do is I'm going to make some notches for where the leg. I'm going to fold it in half and cut the same one. That's a good way when you're making your cutting your shape out of your felt too. Is also a good way. If you do one side, you can fold it in half to make the other side the same. Okay, now that we have this cut, we're going to set this aside. Our loom knitted, sort of like a big hat really. And I still have it attached to the needle. I'm going to stretch it down over my stool. And I'm going to cinch up this center. The reason why I'm doing this all the way around, sort of back stitching it, is because I want it to lay as flat as possible. So you're sort of able to go around and wherever it's sort of poking up because of the gather, you can just sort of pick a few threads and you're sort of sewing them together. So I'm just going to pull it tight. I don't want to pull it super tight like we did the fabric. I'm just making it so it lays flat. This is going to be covered up by the felt. Remember, we also have that other fabric layer under there that might cause you some problems. Our little felt piece that we cut. Okay, I'm going to staple my felt on here. As such. Alright, the last is more for cosmetic purposes, and we are going to use the hot glue gun to glue the gimp braid around on the bottom to cover up these staples. You can buy this braid on Amazon and any other fabric store. It's a pretty standard braid used for all kinds of craft projects. I'm going to loop around the leg. Okay, when I get back over to where I started, cut it, but I want to leave a little extra because I want to fold that raw edge under. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the actual braid so I can push it under. I'm going to make sure I go over the part that was where I started, where the raw part was, so I can push it down and completely cover that. And there we have our bottom. Still has a little bit of the little glue tails here and there, but it's no big deal. There's our stool. You just work with it, make it, and you can see how it makes a difference to have that liner in there, because otherwise we would have these like holes right here. But by picking the darkest fabric, you really can't tell that you have a liner on there. So that's the Loom Knit stool cover, and like I said, you can do this if you have a bar stool or any kind of stool. You can do this easily. You're making a big hat, and we went around and we did sort of stitch this together to make it lay a little flatter where our cinching was, and you can work with that, the cinching part of it, and that's it. It's a pretty simple project. It looks a little bit more complicated, but it's really not. You're basically illuminating a big hat and you're just covering your stool. So you can use various things. If you want to use padding like I did, like I said, I used the sponge from a bed topper. You could just use a piece of sponge. If you have some batting, you could just stuff it. You could, you could cover it, make a small hole in your lining, and then stuff it with cotton batting or fiberfill. It would work the same. It would be fluffier. I wanted something a little firmer than like pillow fiberfill. There's all kinds of things you can recycle to make a cushion, or you can actually buy probably a round foam already cut and maybe trim it to your exact measurements. The important thing is to make sure you find a stool that matches the loom you have. So the same or bigger than your stool. And since I had the oval, I had to go with bigger because it wouldn't have been, you see, it wouldn't have been enough stretch on the sides. And I also used the 3 skeins to get a thicker knit. You could use yarn if you want, but I find that you get more stretch out of using the multiple skeins instead of just the one big chunky thing. Experiment with some old yarn if you're not sure about it. And the great thing about loom knitting is you can always unravel and start over. So there should be very little wasted yarn if you don't like what you're seeing. So this has been Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. Thanks for joining us. Bye.